as I indicated earlier, I'm going to switch hats for a moment and talk a little bit about some of the work that ATEED's recently completed, which is summarised in our latest Economic Insight report, a series of reports we've been producing over the last year, which are intended really to inform the discussion and debate, to take a stronger data-led approach to understanding Auckland's key economic issues and challenges and opportunities. And the work that we've done around trying to understand economic prosperity a bit better comes from probably two places. A change in strategic direction for ATEED, which is something that the Mayor has asked us to look at in terms of the role that we play in responding to Auckland's current economic challenges, and a piece of work that I've been working on with our new Chief Executive, Nick Hill, for the last 6 months or so, has really been trying to understand what that means as we move forward, and that culminates in a conversation next week between our board and governing body, and the insights from some of the work that we've done around economic prosperity have helped to inform that strategic direction, which focuses a lot more on things like how do we get good and more jobs across the city that are more equally distributed, and what does that mean for the activities that we can contribute to moving forward. So it's a real challenge that ATEED has acknowledged in terms of how the city's moved forward over recent years and the role that we can best play in the new environment. And so that's quite exciting for us. And as part of that work, we were asked the question of how will we do more in less prosperous places? And one of our initial conversations that we had with the Mayor's office and with colleagues at the time was we really actually need to understand what we mean by prosperity, because it's got a number of different dimensions and it plays out very differently across the city. Our intention to take that stronger data-led approach. So that's sort of inspired the work that we've done that I'll introduce briefly, but there'll be a lot more information available for you online and post the sessions today. So what I want to talk about is that notion of Auckland's economy collaborating to stimulate inclusive prosperity, and it ties in very well to some of the later discussions and the issues that have been already mentioned. And it's probably something that all of you know and appreciate, but creating and sustaining economic resilience is going to be essential for Auckland's local communities if they're to prosper. And so while Auckland's economy is thriving and GDP growth has been strong, this has been driven by population growth, by a boom in construction, and by record tourism numbers. But not everybody has benefited from the growth. As a region, that rapid growth also brings challenges, and it's challenges in infrastructure and housing that we see every day across the city. But also we've seen a real challenge around the region's productivity. Many of the jobs that have been created, probably 64% of the jobs that have been created over recent years, have not been created in sort of higher value sectors. So while jobs have been created, they're not contributing to our overall productivity as a city, and that has a direct impact on prosperity. So when you start to get underneath some of those headline numbers, it's clear that many Aucklanders in many areas are not feeling the gains of the strong economic growth that we've experienced. So while our average annual GDP growth has been at a rate of around 3.4% since 2011, a 2% growth in population and employment growth of 2.6%, it's a very different story when we start to look at what's happened in terms of the productivity challenge. So GDP per capita, so the amount of output that every worker produces, has only grown by 1% over the same period. And it's a growth of less than 1% between 2015 and 2016. And as Auckland's GDP per capita grows at a slower rate, this has a real impact on our long-term prosperity as a city. So the lack of inclusive prosperity that we're talking about here is something that's actually not just evident in Auckland. It's a global issue that's of increasing concern across the developed world. And if we look at some of the trends and how Auckland kind of mirrors patterns that are happening globally, what we can see is, again, the global economy has recovered slowly since the last financial crisis. And it's clear that many of those that were less prosperous prior to the crisis remain so and are benefiting less from the recovery. So there's increasing recognition across the developed world and across the economic development community that global growth has not delivered equally for all communities. A strong post-GFC performance is making deeper issues and masking some deeper issues in our economies, and it's leading economic development think tanks and organisations across the world to recognise that top-line growth doesn't ensure bottom-line prosperity. This starts to really make us ask questions about that current model of economic development and the notion that all growth is good and that all growth will trickle down and benefit all areas. And at a city level, there's been a lot of interesting debate and conversation about this globally. It's sometimes referred to as the new urban crisis in terms of the work of people like Richard Florida, the new localism work that's been done by Bruce Katz at Brookings Institution, really looking at the impact of this current wave of growth and globalization and how do we strive to find solutions that are about stimulating more inclusive and equitable growth. And that was really the sort of broader context that drove AT to try and better understand these challenges at an Auckland level and to build a better and common set of data that would inform any actions we collectively take around addressing inclusive growth. The result of that is the work that we partnered on with Infometrics to develop the Auckland Prosperity Index, the summary of which is published today and is available on our website, which looks at, it's a tool. I mean, essentially the index is a tool in a data-driven era. The purpose of it is to explore the prosperity differentials that exist across Auckland, to outline what might be causing some of these differentials and examining that data at a local board level to get a true picture across the city of these issues and differences. So for each local board, the data that will be made available for you all looks at a series of key indicators and provides a granular level of insight with robust data and comparable data that allows for an analysis at individual and multi-board levels. And one of the things that you will all know is that there are many factors that influence prosperity at a local area. And thankfully today, we're going to be hearing some of our panelists and our expert speakers about some of the key responses. Local wealth building, the importance of social inclusion, the role of anchor institutions and the role of communities. And one of the things that we've identified in the work around the Prosperity Index is that these factors that influence prosperity range from everything from the level of wealth and prosperity within individual households to how skilled our labour force is, to how well our communities are connected to employment, education and business opportunities. There's other key factors that we look at in the index, things like demography. So where population growth contributes to economic prosperity, when it's at a level that ensures the working age population can support non-working age residents. There's also a key factor in terms of our local business activity and what that contributes to prosperity. So successful economies tend to be more innovative, more dynamic businesses and have the thriving entrepreneurial environment. So when we start to look at that at the local level, we start to look at things like the existing business base, the business size, the extent to which it's been growing, whether self-employment's rising. And then also a economic quality index. So what that starts to look at is issues around the ability of that local board area to offer local jobs, especially those in the more highly skilled and knowledge-intensive sectors. So economic quality also captures future job prospects and the diversity of the economy in terms of building resilience. So what we've tried to do is pull together the available data in a common format to inform discussions, decisions and actions. And what we know is that addressing some of these prosperity challenges has to be done collaboratively between the city, between communities, between government and between business, just as we're all here today. So discussing future local economic resilience and playing to our different areas of expertise to drive change into the future. So there is an opportunity to address these issues, and you'll hear some practical examples of how people are already doing this. And as I said at the start, there's an opportunity in terms of the strategic direction from ATEED for us to think more fully about how do we build on the great work that John Norman and the team already do around local economic development to get future growth. And some of the things that we think this includes is how do we actually create more high-value employment opportunities, particularly in South and West Auckland, where there's multiple prosperity challenges. That partnership that's really important between how we work with Panuku and how we work with Auckland Transport around these spaces, and maximise the investments that are being made into economic infrastructure across the city. So there's regeneration benefits that can be realised by focusing on how to unlock some of the benefits that come from housing and transport investment. I think there's an ongoing need for us as a city to continue to embrace innovation and technology as a long-time driver of productivity and prosperity, and helping our existing businesses grow and prosper. So all of these factors have come into the work that AT's been doing around thinking about our future role. When we consider how to drive prosperity, there's a number of cross-cutting themes that we also have to be very conscious of in an Auckland environment. Firstly, the opportunities around Māori economic growth. How do we unlock and support the growth and diversification of the Māori economy and Māori businesses? Secondly, how do we really take an enhanced spatial focus and prioritise what we do? Because, as has already been indicated, resources are scarce and we have to actually focus on where we can get the biggest return. So supporting more area-based initiatives, such as the Southern Initiative that's already been mentioned, and we'll also be hearing from Panuku in terms of some of those areas. So for AT to get closer to those projects and work in a much more collaborative fashion. And lastly, some of the issues around sustainable development. We know that promoting and generating long-term economic outcomes, if it's to be sustained, it's got to be thinking about current and future generations. So the findings of this work will be available both in summary form today and in much more detail over the next week or so. And there'll be a process where AT's local economic development team will meet with each local board, will go through the reports and provide analysis and insight of the data.